Hello, so this video is going to be an overview of the proposal assignment. And in the video, I'm going to go over some of the concepts, things I'm looking for. I'm also going to go over the assignment sheet with you and some of the fundamentals of the approach to it and things to make it work with the requirements for the assignment. So I just started off here because I just wanted to remind you that you need to go to the assignments tab, click in there. I'm already in there. And then probably later in the week, I'll just put the proposal folder at the top. But right now, the rhetorical analysis is sort of finishing up, so it's at the top. So I'm going to click on the proposal essay folder, and hopefully we'll get into that. There we go. So I've got the deadlines there. These may shift a little bit. These were sort of tentative dates and proposed dates, but I may change them around a little bit, not in the sense of anything you would do earlier, but I may add extensions, like a few days, just to make sure you have enough time to get everything done. So here's the main part that you need to pay attention to when you're sort of getting your assignment together. So to start with, I'm going to go to the proposal assignment. And this just gives you all the guidelines for what the nuts and bolts of the assignment are. It's always important to go to the assignment sheet first and then build around that with all the supplemental handouts that I offer you. So this is sort of the outline or the kind of basics for the assignment. So the purpose of a proposal is you're proposing something. So we started off this semester and you guys kind of thought up an idea of something you might be interested in. And then you did some preliminary research and you tried to discover kind of what people in social media, Facebook, Google, Google Scholar maybe, you looked at some TED Talks and you tried to figure out what people in that industry, what your college major is or the industry in which you want to work. You try to figure out what people were talking about, what the problems were, things that might need to be improved upon. And so you did that preliminary research. And then you went into the annotated bibliography assignment after doing the interview. So hopefully the interview also added to that sort of preliminary thought process. And then you went in to the annotated bibliography, and that's where you did the scholarly research. Hopefully between the preliminary research time frame and the scholarly research in your annotated bibliography, you began to shape some ideas about what the problems in the industry were, what things needed to be improved, and maybe you saw along the way that someone was doing something to make change. So that's sort of the approach that we've had all semester. When we went to the rhetorical analysis assignment, you took one argumentative or persuasive article and you analyzed it to see, did that person communicate the ideas properly? We did that because I wanted you to be able to analyze properly. I wanted you to be able to measure if communication was proper and if the persuasion was sound and effective. And we used that with rhetoric, logos, pathos, ethos. We also looked at tone. We looked at the intended audience, the style of the writing. For the proposal, it's a very formal form of writing and it's academic. So your tone should be academic and formal. So you wouldn't have any slang or you wouldn't take a lot of shortcuts with your phrasing because it's formal. So that's what we talk about when we talk about tone, sort of the mood of the piece, sometimes if it's literature, or the type of writing if it's more of a formal type of documentation. So anyway, we kind of started again with this wide open range of thought processes, and then you narrowed it down, and we've worked with a claim all semester, and I wanted you at the very beginning to come up with a claim which was the solution to the problem so that you could sort of focus your research and decide, hey, is this claim working the way I thought it would, or do I need to rework it? And I've encouraged you all semester to rework that claim so that you can shape it to meet the findings from the research. And this is what researchers do. This is also something that you'll do in your careers. You'll solve problems. A lot of times you may write proposals. Proposals can be small, big, medium, large, extra large. Sometimes you'll be solving problems in your job. Engineers do this, nurses do this. Criminal justice jobs have to solve problems. Educators solve problems. We're always, even with this coronavirus that we have right now, we're having to solve a lot of problems with communication and timing of assignments and kind of a consideration of how students can get the work completed and are we meeting their needs. And so we've had to propose some solutions to the problem of going from the classroom and the traditional way of teaching, whether it's online or face-to-face. We did sort of have a sort of way of teaching that some of that has changed and we're having to problem solve. So in careers, oftentimes you'll be on committees, teams, sometimes just by yourself solving problems. Sometimes a boss, a superior, will ask for you to put that in writing. Propose why you need another employee in your department. Propose why everyone needs a 10% raise. Propose why you can't meet the deadlines that have been set for your department. So a lot of times you're asked to do that in writing. And going back to the rhetoric, in this we're asking you to persuade the audience so that the audience fully understands and believes and understands your point of view, your side of the issue, of the argument. So that's what we're doing in the proposal. You do this a lot in real life anyway. We're always asking friends to do things or family members to understand a point of view. In politics, a lot of politicians are trying to get us to think the way they do or to understand their process of thinking or be on their side so that we vote for them so that they can be elected into office. So in just human communication, there's a lot of proposing going on. There's a lot of persuasion going on. So with the proposal assignment, you're taking that same topic, you're looking back at your research, you're doing some calculations and some measurements to see what worked, what didn't work, and then you're going to prove that solution. So you're going to look back at that claim and say, hey, at this point in the game, I've got to really come up with that final claim. In a proposal essay, most of the time you'll hear it, the thesis statement sort of called a proposition. Sometimes you'll also hear it called a claim. We've been calling it a claim all semester. A claim, a thesis, and a proposition are pretty much the same thing. They function in the same way because it's the core of that essay. It's the one thing that you're going to prove, and you sort of promise that to the reader, or if you're giving a speech, you would promise that to the audience. So whether we're calling it a proposition, a claim, or a thesis, we want to have that controlling idea, that final point to be made in that statement, and we want to show that in the introduction. I like to see it at the end. I think it just kind of sits nicely before you go straight into the proving of that claim. So at this point, you do want to look back at your working claim and just see what needs to be tweaked. Some of you may have to change it a little bit. Some of you may not. I have had students who kind of thought one way, and then the more research they did, they sort of went to the opposing viewpoint of their argument, to the other side. If that happens, maybe give me heads up so that I'll know that you've sort of changed your side of argument at that point. Years ago, one of my students wanted to be a special ed teacher. She worked all semester on proving that students should not be integrated into mainstream classrooms if they have severe learning disabilities. The more she researched, she realized the research proved that maybe there were benefits to, even if it was part of the school day, integrating students with learning disabilities into the mainstream classroom so that they could benefit from a larger range of teaching styles, and also so that they could be integrated with other students. The students that were in the traditional classroom would benefit. The students that were in the traditional exceptional learning classroom would benefit. And so, her research ended up proving the opposite of what she thought it would. So she just tweaked her claim and then proved the opposite. So I do allow for that, but I don't allow for you to change your topic or change your complete scope of research. So whatever you started with, you kind of have to stay in that neighborhood. All right, so the purpose is you're going to convince us of something and you're going to solve a problem. You've kind of developed an issue that you've investigated and now you're going to solve it. So one of the things I like to tell students with a proposal is there's a lot of pressure when you see a word like proposal, like I have to solve all the world's problems. And sometimes we talk about, people will say, well, we need to have world peace. And one of my things with that is, yes, that is a wonderful hope for this world, is world peace. But to solve that, there are so many moving parts to that, and so many things that have been tried and didn't work, and so many different ways of approaching that you couldn't solve that in one essay, and you couldn't solve that in one semester of research. So one of the things, as you're measuring this, as you approach this assignment, make sure you're not biting off more than you can prove. You can prove something simple with this proposal because you're still using all the elements of argument and proposal and persuasion. So don't try to prove too much, or don't try to reestablish something bigger than you can do in one college classroom. People go to school. When I got my master's degree, or anyone gets a master's degree, you have a research topic and you're proving something, and that takes 2-3 years to do that. Someone who gets a PhD, it can take 5 to 10 years to do that, and then sometimes they still haven't fully solved a problem. They've only sort of bitten off a small chunk of it, and then they've proven something that's very specific about the larger problem. So don't try to do too much. That's not what I'm expecting you to do. What I'm expecting you to do is to show a solution. Solutions come in many shapes and sizes. So some people like to show solutions with something like a big project, like we build a building, or we build a wing onto a hospital. One of the things I want you to realize with that is those things come with a price tag. And if you have something that you're proposing that costs money, you're going to have to show the feasibility of that actually being funded. Budgets are tricky things. Who is going to pay for that? How would we convince them that it was a good idea to pay for that? You can't just say, well, the government will pay for it, or taxes will pay for it. That is not feasible. There are so many moving parts with taxes and bond referendums and budget lines and things like that. So you really do have to be able to prove, if you're paying for something, who's going to pay for it, and exactly how is it going to be implemented. If you brush it away and just say, oh, just taxes are going to pay for that. I've had students write, oh, we're going to do a GoFundMe for that. Those are not proper methods of proving your solution. So make sure that you've really thought about the feasibility. Think about, if it's like a hospital, has another hospital built a similar building, or has another hospital purchased a similar piece of equipment that would solve that problem? So even with the COVID-19 issue, a lot of people are saying, oh, let's just get a vaccine. But, if you really start thinking about that, there's a cost to that. There's a cost to the research to implement that. It would take months to do that. After actually the vaccine or the medicine to cure it would be approved. So even though they're fast tracking some of the approvals, it's still going to take some time. So think about that. And that's part of your research too. You may have to bring in some additional research to prove how it would happen, how another place similar has utilized this solution. Years ago, I had a student, she wanted to be a nurse, and she couldn't find a topic. She figured out that she really wanted to work with infants, and maybe in the NICU unit, premature babies. So I told her, I said, go research, see what's kind of going on with that. And I think we talked about this in class, but when she did more research, she found out that there's sort of a method of helping premature babies get stronger faster, and it's called kangaroo care. And it's when you take a premature baby and you allow family members to go skin-to-skin contact, like the mother, the father, I think even grandparents, they'll allow that. And you hold the infant skin to skin, and then for some reason, the premature babies often heal faster and get stronger faster and get to go home faster than a normal time frame that's been set. So what she decided to do, there were some hospitals that utilized kangaroo care, but it wasn't a common practice at that time. I think it's something that's increased and it's used in more hospitals now, but every hospital didn't use it. So she proposed that all NICU units should implement the kangaroo care procedure so that some of the premature babies could go home sooner and they could become healthier sooner. So even though a few hospitals were using the kangaroo care, she argued that more hospitals should use it. So that's a perfectly fine approach to the proposal. If you have any questions about your approach to the proposal, just email me and we can talk it out, or come to one of the Zoom meetings and we can talk about it. All right, so we're basically boiling it down to this big essay. It's not that big, but it's probably going to feel a little bit big. So it's 5 to 7 pages. You don't include the cover page, the abstract, and the abstract is in addition to something you haven't done in another paper for this class, but I'll do another video on the abstract. It'll be a very short video. And then you'll have a references page, and that's where you'll put your citations for, to match the research shown in the paper. You need at least 5 to 7 sources. I have had some students ask me, could I have 8 or 9? For me personally, I will accept more than 7, but don't try to overload. I've given you this range of 5 to 7 because I know that sort of fits the size of this project. If you would try to do 15 sources, that would probably overload your paper. And sometimes you feel like, oh, that's going to really impress my teacher, but it really kind of doesn't, because we're trying to see your ideas as well. And if you're trying to put too much research in, you get lost and kind of buried under that research. So just be careful of that. If you had 8, I'm not going to penalize you. If you had 4, I would take off points because the minimum is 5. If you go 1 over, I'm personally not going to be too upset about that with the sources. If you go over the page count, you will lose points. So the page count has to be firm on 5 to 7 pages. And I truly believe that 5 to 7 sources is really the best range for that. If you have any questions, let me know. We are using APA formatting. We're doing a cover sheet, an abstract, and the references sheet. And then, of course, you'll have your in-text citations. If you turn in this proposal and you have no research in the essay, then you have not followed the standards for this assignment. So make sure that you are showcasing quotes, that you're showing facts, statistics, data, things that prove the points that you're making, and that's going to come from your research. Anything that you put into this paper that is not a commonly understood idea, or it's not what you're analyzing or explaining about the research, has to be cited. You cannot put information that is not your own in that paper without an in-text citation or without properly introducing it with the name of the author or the name of the article. This is very important, and we've talked about this a lot in 111, and I'll probably post like a YouTube video on that too. There's a good one I have on plagiarism. You cannot plagiarize, and plagiarizing is using someone else's ideas, someone else's words in a paper without giving them proper credit. And then you want to write in third person, and you want to write with formal academic tone. Put rigor into your phrasing. Third person would be he, she, it, or the proper noun. You cannot use first person. First person would be I, me, we, us. A lot of students get in the habit of saying we think this. Who is we? I have no idea who that is. So you have to specifically put the proper noun or the actual organization, the actual person that you're referencing. And you can never, ever, ever use second person you. In the English language, that is considered an informal reference, and you're only supposed to use it with friends, acquaintances, someone you know personally. And so never put YOU into a formal document. Some of you are still doing it, and you get significant points taken off. You will never make an A with me if you have YOU in any formal paper, because that is improper. That's not standard English. There are some Romance languages that have multiple U's. You would have the familiar you, and then you would have the collective you, and it's more of a standard in that case to utilize you, but you can't. For the English, we just have one, and it's a very informal usage of the pronoun. Okay, so finally, if I can get it to go, I've given you a very general outline here. you're going to have an outline project that you'll do prior to turning in your proposal. And it's something I like to look at before you turn in the proposal to give you some feedback. This outline that I've put here is mainly just to show you an overview of what's expected in the outline. But then in another handout, which there will be another video just for the outline, I've given you step by step what I'm looking for in the outline that you'll turn in. And I've explained everything in that sheet. So, but this is more of an overview. So just in a quick little conversation, when you're writing the proposal, you want to identify the problem. You want to show the reader what the problem is and what your solution is. Your solution comes in the proposition statement, but you need to identify the problem first. You do that in a little bit of a general way. You're just sort of starting the conversation, I guess, starting the ideas about the problems in that industry. And then you're going to sort of narrow it down as you do with any essay you write. And then you're going to come down to the proposition, claim, or thesis, whatever you're going to call it, which is the controlling idea for that whole paper. One of the things that is so difficult for students to understand, really honestly, and I'm speaking in a general way here, a thesis, a proposition, a claim, that is one sentence. And you as the writer are showing me as the reviewer, and also anyone who would read your paper, this is the one snapshot, the one specific thing that I'm going to prove in this paper. A lot of you, when I ask you to show me a thesis or a claim statement, you give me a paragraph and you've expanded the ideas, and that's not how you shape that sentence. So it is very important that you write and edit and revise that proposition claim statement so that you're showing me the very heart of this paper and the one thing you're going to prove in this paper, the one proposal that you're making. So don't let it get lost. A lot of students, I think, they write and they think, well, if I just kind of shove it in there, she'll figure it out. I always say I'm not up for a riddle when I'm grading a paper late at night. So make sure that it is very specific and it's stated. I think it works best at the end of that introduction. After you write the introduction, for most topics and for most research areas, we're not all experts in that. You've researched it. We haven't as the readers. So I think it's great to describe the problem a little further, maybe do some background information so that we're up to speed with the direction of the research. So that sort of comes after the introduction. Then you're going to start to present your solution. And you're going to show the steps, the parts that need to be implemented. This sort of says you could describe the consequence of the solution. Then you're going to argue the feasibility of it. Not all solutions cost money. So if yours would cost money, you have to show how it would be paid for. But also you can think about feasibility just with the way you change how someone thinks of something. How are we going to change the way people perceive this solution, and how are we going to get them to implement it? As we've seen with the COVID-19 and the kind of quarantine stay in place actions, a lot of people are handling it differently, and there have been a lot of marketing strategies to get people to be persuaded to stay home. That's a difficult thing to get people to do. A lot of people like me who are extroverts, we really feed off of being around people. So to convince me that I need to stay home, they've really got to hit home. So for me, the pathos of it was that I want to stay alive and that I want my loved ones to be safe. So if I can stay home, keep them safe, I'm sort of convinced. The logic is if I go out and I kind of migrate with other people who have been other places, I run the risk of getting the illness as well. So by staying home, logically, I'm not gathering those germs and then bringing them home to my loved ones. And then the credibility is Dr. Fauci, who speaks every day with the president, the vice president, and some of the other officials that go to go out and speak to the press conferences. He's an expert, so he's somebody I listen to. He's served under 6 presidents, I think, or 7 presidents. He's an expert on infectious diseases. So I'm looking to him for my ethos. But then there are other experts that have come out, doctors, nurses, respiratory therapists, who have spoken out about that. So when I hear them speak about the severity of the COVID-19 symptoms and what happens to a patient who ends up in the hospital with it, that convinces me. Those experts know better than I do, so that's what I'm going to listen to. So you can do sometimes change of thought, change of action, and it doesn't necessarily mean you're building $100 million building. It could just be, hey, I'm going to change the way people think about this. I'm going to convince them to make different choices or have different actions. So that sort of goes in the feasibility section. All of you have different topics, so it's going to look different. And so when you look at this outline, take it as a general snapshot, and you don't have to meet every little thing that's in there. We've sort of shown you the parts of it or different ways to approach it. Once you sort of showcase your solution and you show how it would work and you kind of prove all the parts to it, you have to show and concede something from the opposition. So any good persuasion has to have some humility to it. So we have to show that, hey, I do believe that my side is correct, but I have also researched the opposition. We talked about this, I think, when you were doing your annotated bibliography. You have to research the opposition to see what they are researching and stating about the topic and the solutions that are available. So you want to go look at the opposition, pick probably the one or two that are the top reasons from the opposition of why maybe your solution wouldn't work. With the standpoint of the premature babies and the kangaroo care, sometimes the mother is still sick from the delivery. Sometimes the mother lives 100 miles away and cannot be there for skin-to-skin contact. So that would be an opposition to why every patient, every premature baby could not benefit from the skin-to-skin contact. Also, some premature babies are very ill. They are hooked up to tubes. They can't be moved easily. So maybe the skin-to-skin wouldn't work for them. So those are the things you pull from the opposition. And that's called a concession. You're conceding that while my solution should work, there are some things that may not match up exactly with that solution. Once you give that one or two thing from the opposition, then I want you to refute that, because you don't ever want to leave an argument giving away something from the opposition. So you're going to sort of refute the claim from the opposition, and then you're going to come back to your side of the argument. So you concede one or two things from the opposing viewpoint, and then you refute that concession, and you're going to come back to your solution and your research and what you're proving. Once you do the concession and the refutation, then you want to conclude it. You want to restate your proposition or your claim statement, and then you want to broaden it out a little bit and come to a final thought, something that you can give your reader to take away, to think a little further with it. In your conclusion, you shouldn't include any new research or any new data or anything. You're basically just summing everything up, but make sure you restate that proposition statement, claim statement, because you want to remind the reader what you just proved to them. You're always reminding the reader, and you're sort of guiding them through the thought process. And that's it. The one thing I want to say about the concession and refutation is there are some controversial topics, and sometimes the concession refutation works better at the top or the beginning of the essay. So it would sort of come from this section, like you would do the introduction, and then you would come in and sort of state the problem and kind of give some background. And then some students choose to put the concession refutation here before they start to prove their solution. That's not wrong. It's a choice you can make. When I did this outline, I just sort of positioned it further down right before the conclusion, because that's sort of what I like the best. I think it works for most essays. But if you have a super controversial topic and you think you need to take care of any thoughts about the opposition to your argument, you can go ahead and take care of that at the beginning of the essay. But I just sort of positioned it there. So this here, the concession and refutation, can be moved higher into the essay. If you're not sure how to handle it, it's a conversation we could have. But it's not wrong to put it up there. I would warn you not to try to give concessions for every point, because that starts to turn into a comparison contrast, and that's not what we're doing. You really do want to prove your side of the argument. So you don't want to put too many things in to the essay along the way. You want to have it kind of compartmentalized either at the beginning or the end. So that's sort of my overview of the proposal. There is another handout that you can read on your own, and it sort of guides you through. Here it is. I'm not going to read all this to you or go through it on this video, but I would suggest that you go through it. It gives you a lot of details about the assignment, and kind of goes through it step by step even further than what we talked about here. So I encourage you to watch all the videos. I'm going to have one on the outline, one on the abstract, and then I'll probably have one where I go over a student's sample with you. Okay, I look forward to reading your proposals. Let me know if you have any questions.